Jake Morrison felt his heart beat faster as he walked into the huge room. The ceiling was so high he could barely see the top. The walls were made of some kind of crystal that changed colors as he moved. Strange lights floated in the air without any wires or support. This was the main meeting hall of the Galactic Council, and Jake was the first human to ever step foot inside it. Hundreds of aliens filled the room. Some looked like giant insects with wings that sparkled like rainbows. Others were balls of light that moved through the air like living stars. There were creatures made of metal that looked like robots but moved like they were alive. Some aliens were so strange that Jake could not even figure out what they were supposed to be. Jake wore a simple blue uniform with a small Earth flag on his shoulder. Next to all these amazing alien beings, he looked very plain. His uniform was just regular cloth, while the aliens wore robes that glowed with their own light, armor that seemed to be made of pure energy, and some had no clothes at all because they were made of gas or light. The room was full of noise. Every alien was talking at once, but Jake could understand them because of a small device in his ear that translated their words. Most of what he heard was not very nice. They were talking about humans, and they were not saying good things. Tall creature that looked like a praying mantis, but was as big as a horse, turned to look at Jake. Its eyes were like mirrors, and when it spoke, its voice sounded like someone shaking a box of marbles. "So this is the famous human," it said. "I heard your people just learned how to leave your own planet a few years ago." Other aliens started to laugh. The sound was terrible because each species laughed in a different way. Some made clicking sounds, others buzzed like bees, and a few made noises that sounded like music played backwards. A blob of glowing purple liquid that floated in a clear container spoke next. "We heard humans still use chemical rockets to travel in space. How cute. We learned to fold space and time when your planet was still covered in ice." Jake took a deep breath. He had practiced for this moment for months. He knew the aliens would not take humans seriously at first. That was actually part of the plan. "You are right," he said in a calm voice. "We are new to space travel. We are probably the youngest species in this room." This made the aliens laugh even more. A robot-like creature with glowing red eyes stepped forward. "Young is not the right word, human. You are primitive. Your technology is so basic that our children's toys are more advanced than your best computers." Jake nodded again. "That is probably true too." The robot seemed surprised that Jake was not getting angry. "Do you not understand what we are saying? We are telling you that your species is not ready to join the Galactic Council. You are like babies trying to sit at the adult table." A creature that looked like it was made of living crystal started to make a ringing sound. Jake's translator told him this was how they laughed. "Maybe we should give them a few hundred years to grow up," the crystal being said. "Then they can come back and ask again." Jake looked around the room. Every alien was staring at him, waiting to see if he would get upset or angry. Instead, he smiled. "I understand why you think that. From where you sit, humans must look very weak and helpless. But I want to ask you something. How many of your species have been wiped out by disasters?" The room got a little quieter. The floating blob of purple liquid pulsed with annoyance. "What does that have to do with anything?" "Just curious," Jake said, "because humans have almost been wiped out many times. Ice ages that froze most of our planet, diseases that killed millions of us, wars that destroyed entire cities, volcanoes that blocked out the sun for years. Each time we thought it was the end." The giant mantis creature clicked its mandibles. "If you are trying to make us feel sorry for you, it will not work. Every species faces challenges, but we are still here," Jake said. "Every time something tried to kill us all, some of us survived. And those survivors learned how to make sure it would not happen again. Or at least, they tried to." An alien that looked like a small sun floating in the air grew brighter. "Survival is not special. We all survived long enough to reach the stars." Jake looked at the glowing being. "Did you? Or did you inherit your star travel from someone else?" The room became uncomfortable. Many of the aliens looked at each other. The crystal being rang out again, but this time it sounded annoyed. "Our Ancestors left us great knowledge, we built upon their wisdom. That is smart, Jake said. But what happens when that knowledge is not enough? What happens when you face something your ancestors never saw before? The robot with red eyes stepped closer to Jake. We adapt, we learn, we overcome. With your technology, Jake said, with your power, with your advanced science. But what happens when all of that fails? What happens when your computers break down, your power runs out, and your science cannot? Explain what is happening. The purple blob pulsed faster. That does not happen. Our technology is perfect. Jake smiled again. That is what the dinosaurs thought about their size and strength. That is what every species thinks right before they disappear forever. The giant mantis spread its wings wide. Are you threatening us, human? Not at all, Jake said. I am just telling you what makes humans different. We learn to survive when everything goes wrong. When our tools break, we make new ones. When our homes are destroyed, we build new ones. When our leaders fail, we find new ones. We do not just survive disasters, we get stronger because of them. The room was getting more tense. Some aliens were starting to look angry. Others seemed curious about what Jake was saying. The floating sun grew even brighter. You speak of strength, but you have no strength. You cannot even travel faster than light. You cannot manipulate matter with your minds. You cannot exist in the vacuum of space without machines to help you. You are right, Jake said. We cannot do any of those things. But we can do something else. We can figure out how to survive when all of those amazing abilities stop working. The crystal being made a sound like breaking glass. Our abilities do not stop working. We are beyond such primitive concerns. Jake looked around the room at all the magnificent aliens. Each one was more powerful than any human could ever be. Each one could do things that would seem like magic to people on Earth, but Jake noticed something else. They all seemed very sure that their power would never fail them. I hope you are right, Jake said quietly. I really do. Because if you are wrong and something happens that your power cannot fix, you are going to need someone who knows how to survive when everything falls apart. The robot tilted its head. And you think humans are those someone? I think humans are the species that learned to make fire when the world was cold, to build boats when the world was flooded, and to grow food when the world was hungry. Every other species in this room learned to use power that was given to them. Humans learned to create power from nothing. The room fell silent for a moment. Then the giant mantis started to laugh again. Creating power from nothing? You mean rubbing two sticks together? All the aliens joined in the laughter. The sound filled the huge room and echoed off the crystal walls. Jake stood there and let them laugh. He had expected this reaction. In fact, he was counting on it. Yes, he said when the laughter died down. Rubbing two sticks together. Because when your fusion reactors fail and your quantum computers crash and your matter manipulators stop working, someone is going to need to know how to rub two sticks together. The laughter started again, but this time it sounded a little less sure. Jake pressed a button on his wrist device and a blue light appeared in the air in front of him. The light started to show pictures that moved like a movie. The aliens stopped laughing and looked at what Jake was showing them. The first picture showed Earth from space. It was a blue and green ball floating in the darkness. Then the pictures changed to show human cities, forests, oceans, and mountains. The aliens watched but did not seem very interested. This is your world, said the giant mantis creature. It looks ordinary. We have seen millions of worlds like this one. You are right, Jake said. Earth is not special to look at. But let me show you what happened on this ordinary world. The pictures changed again. Now they showed human history. There were images of early humans living in caves, hunting animals with spears and making fires. The aliens started to laugh again. The purple blob in the container pulsed with amusement. Look at them. They are like children playing with dangerous toys. How did such primitive creatures ever reach space? Jake let the pictures keep playing. They showed humans building pyramids, sailing across oceans, and inventing new machines. But every few minutes, the pictures would show something terrible happening. Volcanoes exploding, ice covering the land, wars destroying cities, diseases killing millions of people. Your species seems to enjoy destroying itself, said the crystal being. Very inefficient. We do not enjoy it, Jake said. But we learn something important from all these disasters. We learn that the world does not care if we live or die. So we had to learn to care for ourselves. The pictures showed more human history. After every disaster, humans would rebuild. After every war, they would make new peace. After every disease, they would find new medicine. The aliens were starting to pay more attention. The robot with red eyes stepped forward. This is just normal evolution. All species go through difficult times. Do they? Jake asked. How many difficult times has your species survived? The robot was quiet for a moment. The Titanium Lords have not faced major challenges for over 2,000 years. We perfected our technology and eliminated most problems before they could threaten. U.S., Jake nodded. That is very smart. But what happens when you face a problem that your technology cannot solve? Our technology can solve any problem, the robot said. We have computed solutions for every possible disaster. The floating sun grew brighter. The human speaks of things he does not understand. Advanced species do not face the same primitive challenges that his people struggled with. Jake changed the pictures again. Now they showed humans in space. The first rockets looked tiny and fragile compared to the alien ships in the room. Human space stations were small and simple. The first human colonies on other planets were just a few small buildings. The aliens started laughing again. Look at their space technology, buzzed a creature that looked like a giant bee. They still burn chemical fuel to leave their planet. We learned to bend space itself before your son was born. How long did it take your species to learn space travel? Jake asked. The bee creature buzzed proudly. The Zephyrians achieved interstellar flight in less than 50 years after we discovered our natural ability to manipulate quantum fields. Natural ability, Jake repeated. You were born with the power to travel between stars? Of course, the bee said. All advanced species have natural gifts that make space travel possible. It is what separates us from primitive species like yours. Jake looked around the room. What natural gifts do humans have? The crystal being made a ringing sound? None that we can see. You have no energy manipulation. You cannot survive in vacuum. You cannot even communicate without making noise with your mouth. You are right, Jake said. Humans have no natural gifts for space travel. We had to invent everything from scratch. It took us thousands of years to figure out how to fly. It took us hundreds more to reach other planets. The purple blob pulsed with amusement. This is why you should not be in the Galactic Council. You are too slow to learn. Too primitive to understand advanced concepts. Jake smiled. Let me ask you something else. What happens when a Zephyrian is born without the ability to manipulate quantum fields? The bee creature stopped buzzing. That does not happen. All Zephyrians have the gift. But if it did happen, they would die, the bee said quietly. They could not survive without their natural abilities. Jake turned to the crystal being. What happens when a crystalline loses their connection to the collective consciousness? The crystal being's light dimmed. They become nothing, just dead rock, but this is impossible. The collective is eternal. And what happens when a titanium Lord's processors are damaged? The robot's red eyes flickered. System shut down. Complete failure. But our technology prevents such occurrences. Jake nodded slowly. I see. So when your natural gifts fail, you die. When your technology breaks, you die. When your perfect systems have problems, you die? The room became very quiet. The aliens were starting to look uncomfortable. What happens when a human loses their tools? Jake continued. When their technology breaks? When their systems fail? He changed the pictures again. Now they showed humans in survival situations. People living through earthquakes, floods, and storms. Humans making shelter from broken pieces of buildings. People finding food and water in destroyed cities. Humans helping each other when everything Around them was falling apart. They adapt, Jake said. They find new ways to survive. They help each other. They rebuild. They keep going. The floating sun dimmed slightly. This is just stubbornness. Any species can struggle to survive. Can they? Jake asked. Let me tell you about the Great Dying. It happened on Earth about 250 million years ago. A massive volcanic eruption poisoned the air and water. 90% of all life on Earth died. Almost everything was wiped out. The aliens listened more carefully now. But some life survived, Jake continued. The survivors were not the biggest, or the strongest, or the smartest. They were the ones who could live in the new world that the disaster created. They were the ones who could change when everything else stayed the same. Jake changed the pictures to show human disasters. Cities destroyed by earthquakes but rebuilt bigger than before. Forests burned down but growing back stronger. People who lost everything but started over again. This is what humans learned, Jake said. We learned that the universe does not care about us. It will throw asteroids at us, freeze us with ice ages, burn us with volcanoes, and kill us with diseases. But we also learned that we can survive all of this if we never give up and never stop trying to adapt. The crystal being made a sound like cracking ice. But you are still so primitive. Your technology is thousands of years behind ours. Yes, Jake said. But our technology was built by people who knew it might break. We designed our systems to work even when parts of them failed. We trained our people to fix things when they stopped working. We made backup plans for our backup plans. The robot tilted its head. This seems inefficient. Why not just build technology that never fails? Because nothing lasts forever, Jake said. Every star will burn out. Every planet will die. Every species will face something they have never seen before. When that happens, you need people who know how to survive when everything goes wrong. The purple blob pulsed more slowly. You speak. As if disaster is certain. It is, Jake said simply. The only question is whether you will be ready when it comes. The room fell silent again. The aliens looked at each other with expressions that might have been worry. For the first time since Jake had entered the room, they were not laughing. The silence in the room did not last long. Soon the aliens were talking again, and they seemed angry that Jake had made them think about uncomfortable things. They wanted to show him that they were still much more powerful than humans could ever. A new alien stepped forward. This one looked like it was made of flowing water, but the water glowed with its own light. When it spoke, its voice sounded like waves crashing on a beach. Enough of this talk about failure and disaster. Let us show you what real power looks like. The water creature raised what might have been its arms, and suddenly the air around it began to shimmer. The temperature in that part of the room dropped so fast that Jake could see his breath. Ice crystals formed in the air and started to dance around the alien like tiny stars. We are the nebula dancers, the creature said. We can control the building blocks of reality itself. We can make fire from nothing, create ice from thin air, and bend the laws of physics to our will. Other aliens began to nod and make sounds of approval. The crystal being started to glow brighter. Yes, let us show this primitive human what true advancement looks like. The crystal creature focused its attention on a spot in the air, and suddenly, a small sun appeared there. It was only as big as a basketball, but it gave off real heat and light. The aliens near it had to move away because of the intense energy. The crystalline collective can create stellar fusion with our minds alone, the crystal being said proudly. We do not need machines or tools or primitive fire-making techniques. The giant mantis creature spread its wings wide. Watch this. Human, the air around the mantis began to twist and bend. Jake felt like he was looking through water, and suddenly the mantis was in 3 places at once. Then it was in 6 places. Then 12. We Zephyrians exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, the mantis said, its voice coming from all 12 copies at once. We can be everywhere and nowhere. We can see past, present, and future all at the same time. The robot with red eyes stepped forward. Our turn. The robot's body began to change shape. Its arms became longer, its legs became wheels and new tools appeared from hidden compartments. In seconds, it had transformed into a complex machine that Jake could not even understand. Titanium lords can reshape our bodies at will, the robot said. We can become any tool needed for any job. We can process information at the speed of light and make calculations that would take your fastest computers millions of years. The floating sun grew even brighter. And we ethereal sovereigns can exist as pure energy. We do not need physical form at all. We can travel through solid matter, survive in the vacuum of space, and live forever without aging or dying. One by one, each alien species began to show off their amazing abilities. There were creatures that could turn invisible, aliens that could read minds, beings that could manipulate time itself. Each demonstration was more impressive than the last. Jake watched it all with growing concern, but not because he was impressed. He was worried because he could see what the aliens could not. Dr. Susan Clark, the human scientist who had come with him, was watching her instruments with alarm. "Jake," she whispered so quietly that only he could hear. "The energy readings are going crazy. All these power demonstrations are creating interference patterns." Jake looked at his own small device. The numbers on the screen were climbing higher and higher. The ship they were on, the Nexus Prime, was having to work harder and harder to contain all the energy. The aliens were releasing, but the aliens were too busy showing off to notice. They were like children playing with fire, except their fire could destroy entire star systems. A new alien joined the demonstration. This one looked like a living shadow, dark and constantly shifting. "We are the Void Swimmers," it said in a voice that sounded like whispers in an empty room. "We can exist in the space between stars in the cold vacuum where nothing else can survive." The shadow creature began to absorb light from around it. The room grew darker as it pulled in photons and energy, creating a sphere of absolute darkness around itself. Another alien that looked like a tree made of metal and circuits stepped forward. The quantum weavers can manipulate the fabric of spacetime itself. The tree-like being raised its metal branches, and suddenly a small hole appeared in the air. Through the hole, Jake could see stars and galaxies far away. "We can create doorways to anywhere in the universe," the tree said proudly. "Distance means nothing to us." The demonstrations continued for what felt like hours. Each alien species wanted to prove that they were more advanced than humans. They created matter from nothing, stopped time, read thoughts, and performed miracles that seemed impossible. But Jake noticed something else. The ship was starting to shake. It was very slight at first, just a small vibration in the floor. But it was getting stronger. Dr. Clark grabbed Jake's arm. "The harmonic resonance is building up," she whispered urgently. "All these different types of energy are starting to interfere with each other." Jake looked around the room. The aliens were still showing off, completely unaware that their demonstrations were creating a dangerous situation. They were so focused on proving their superiority that they could not see the warning signs. The purple blob creature decided to join the show. "Observe the power of the Valkyrians," it said. The blob began to glow brighter and brighter until it was painful to look at. The energy it was producing made the air itself start to hum. The crystal being, not to be outdone, created an even bigger sun. This one was the size of a car, and the heat from it made several aliens move to the other side of the room. The water creature responded by creating a massive ice storm that filled half the room with swirling snow and hail. The temperature dropped so fast that some of the aliens' breath became visible. Jake felt the ship shake again, more violently this time. Warning lights began to flash on the walls, but the aliens either did not notice or did not care. "They are going to destroy the ship," Dr. Clark whispered. Jake watched as more and more aliens joined the demonstration. They were trying to outdo each other, each one using more power than the last. The air in the room was beginning to shimmer. With all the different types of energy being released, the floating sun creature decided to show its ultimate power. It began to draw energy from the ship's own power systems, pulling electricity and exotic matter from the Nexus Prime's core. The creature grew brighter and brighter until it was like looking at a real star. That was when the ship's computer finally spoke. Its voice was calm but urgent. Warning. Energy overload detected. Harmonic interference approaching critical levels. Please cease all power demonstrations immediately. The aliens ignored the warning. They thought the ship's systems were just being overly cautious. After all, they were the most advanced species in the galaxy. Surely they could handle a little energy demonstration, but Jake knew better. He had seen what happened when complex systems were pushed beyond their limits. He had studied the disasters that occurred when people became too confident in their technology. The ship shook again, and this time everyone felt it. Some of the aliens looked around with mild curiosity, but most of them kept showing off their abilities. Jake, Dr. Clark said, her voice tight with fear. We need to get out of here. The containment systems are starting to fail. Jake looked around the room at all the magnificent aliens, still playing with forces they did not fully understand. In a few minutes, they were all going to learn what humans had always known. Sometimes, the most dangerous enemy is your own confidence. The ship shook harder, and this time everyone in the room felt it. The crystal walls around them began to make cracking sounds. The floating lights that had been moving smoothly through the air started to flicker and spark, but the aliens did not stop their power demonstrations. If anything, they pushed harder. The tree-like alien opened an even bigger hole in space. The shadow creature absorbed more light until part of the room was completely dark. The water alien created a tornado of ice and snow that reached from floor to ceiling. Jake watched in horror as the most advanced beings in the galaxy acted like children who could not stop playing with matches near gasoline. The ship's computer spoke again, and this time its voice had an edge of panic that machines were not supposed to have. Critical warning. Exotic matter containment failure in progress. Old demonstrations must cease immediately. Evacuation protocols are now active. Finally, some of the aliens began to pay attention. The giant mantis folded its wings and looked around with its mirror-like eyes. What does the machine mean by containment failure? The robot alien, which had been showing off by turning into different shapes, suddenly froze. Its red eyes blinked rapidly as it processed information. The ship's exotic matter core is becoming unstable. The harmonic interference from our demonstrations is disrupting the containment fields. The purple blob pulsed with confusion. That is impossible. The Nexus Prime is the most advanced ship ever built. It can handle any amount of energy we produce. Apparently not, Dr. Clark said loudly enough for everyone to hear. Her instruments were screaming warnings, and the numbers on her screens were climbing into dangerous levels. The floating sun alien burned brighter with anger. You dare to suggest that our powers could damage Galactic Council technology? Your primitive understanding of physics is showing, human. Jake stepped forward. My primitive understanding is telling me that when you mix different types of exotic energy in an uncontrolled way, bad things happen. And right now, very bad things are about to happen. The ship lurched violently to one side, throwing several aliens off balance. The crystal being, which had been floating gracefully, suddenly crashed into a wall. The water creature lost control of its ice tornado, and frozen chunks began flying around the room. Emergency lights started flashing red. Alarms began to wail. The ship's computer spoke again, but this time its voice was breaking up with static. Containment breach in Sector 7. Reality distortion field expanding. Probability of total ship destruction is now 73%. That got the aliens' attention. They stopped their demonstrations and looked around with expressions that might have been fear. If Jake could read alien faces correctly, the robot alien's voice was shaking. 73%? That cannot be correct. Run diagnostics immediately. Diagnostics are offline, the computer replied. Primary systems are failing. Backup systems are failing. Emergency systems are failing. The room filled with panic. The aliens who had been so proud and confident just minutes before were now running around like scared animals. The Zephyrian mantis tried to use its dimension-shifting powers to escape, but the space distortions from the ship's failing systems made it impossible. Instead of appearing in multiple places, the mantis got stuck halfway between dimensions. Flickering in and out of existence, the crystalline collective tried to use their shared consciousness to coordinate an escape plan, but the exotic matter radiation was interfering with their mental connection. Their harmonic voices, which had been so beautiful before, now sounded like breaking glass as they lost contact with each other. The ethereal sovereigns, who existed as pure energy, found themselves unable to maintain their form as the ships. Energy fields went haywire. They began to flicker and fade like dying light bulbs. The quantum weavers tried to open doorways to escape, but the holes they created led to random places in space. One opened into the heart of a star. Another opened into empty void. A third opened into what looked like a nightmare dimension full of swirling chaos. Even the mighty titanium lords, with all their advanced technology, stood frozen as their processing systems overloaded trying to calculate solutions to an impossible problem. "This is not supposed to happen," the purple blob said, its voice high with panic. "Our technology is perfect. Our powers are absolute. We do not face problems we cannot solve." Jake looked around at the chaos and felt a strange calm settle over him. This was exactly what he had been afraid of, but it was also exactly what he had trained for. While the aliens panicked because their perfect world was falling apart, Jake did what humans had always done when faced with disaster. He got to work. "Susan," he called to Dr. Clark, "can you track the source of the interference?" Dr. Clark was already working, her hands flying over her simple human instruments, while the aliens' advanced technology failed around them. The resonance cascade started in the power distribution grid. If we can isolate the exotic matter flow and redirect it away from the main systems, we might be able to stabilize the containment field. Jake nodded and turned to Admiral Lisa Hayes, the third member of their team. "Lisa, we need to get to the ship's core. Can you find us a route?" Lisa was studying a basic map display on her wrist device. Around them, aliens with the power to reshape reality were standing helpless while a human woman used a simple computer to plan their escape route. "The main corridors are blocked by energy discharges," Lisa said. "But there are maintenance tunnels that should still be passable. We can get there, but Jake, the radiation levels near the core will be lethal. How long do we have?" Jake asked. Dr. Clark checked her readings. "Maybe 8 minutes before the exotic matter goes critical. After that, the ship turns into a very small black hole." The aliens heard this and their panic got worse. The shadow creatures tried to hide in their own darkness, but the reality distortions made even shadows unstable. The tree-like aliens tried to root themselves to the ship's structure, but the metal around them was becoming uncertain, shifting between solid and liquid states. The robot alien turned to Jake with desperate hope in its red eyes. "Human, you seem to understand what is happening. Your technology may be primitive, but can you help us?" Jake looked at the robot, then at all the other aliens who were staring at him with fear and confusion. These were beings who could manipulate time, create matter from nothing, and exist in multiple dimensions at once. But when their perfect systems failed, they were more helpless than human children. "We can try," Jake said, "but we will have to do this the human way." The crystal being's light flickered weakly. "What does that mean?" Jake was already heading toward the emergency exit, his team close behind him. "It means we are going to fix this with our hands, our brains, and whatever tools we can find. No fancy powers, no perfect technology. Just 3 humans with a toolbox and a lot of experience dealing with things that go wrong." The floating sun alien dimmed with confusion. "But how can such primitive methods possibly work where our advanced systems have failed?" Jake paused at the doorway and looked back at the room full of panicking aliens. "Because when everything goes wrong, primitive is exactly what you need." Then he and his team disappeared into the emergency corridor, leaving behind hundreds of the galaxy's most advanced beings to wait and see if 3 humans could save them all. Jake crawled through the maintenance tunnel with Dr. Clark and Admiral Hayes right behind him. The tunnel was hot, dark, and filled with smoke. Sparks flew from broken wires, and the metal walls groaned as the ship twisted under the stress of Failing systems. This was exactly the kind of situation that humans had been dealing with for thousands of years. When things broke, when systems failed, when the world became dangerous and unpredictable, humans had learned to keep moving forward. Left turn ahead, Admiral Hayes called out, reading her simple map by the light of a small flashlight. Behind them, they could hear the muffled sounds of alien panic. Echoing through the ship's corridors, they crawled for what felt like hours but was probably only a few minutes. The air was getting thicker and harder to breathe. Dr. Clark's radiation detector was clicking faster and faster as they got closer to the ship's core. "Jake," she said, "the radiation levels are getting really bad. We should not stay down here too long." "How long do we have?" Jake asked, not stopping his crawling. "Maybe 5 minutes before it becomes dangerous? Maybe 10 before it kills us?" Jake nodded and kept moving. This was another thing humans had learned over the years. Sometimes you had to choose between certain death and possible death, and when you did, you always chose possible death. They reached the end of the tunnel and found themselves looking into the ship's core chamber. It was a huge room filled with machines that Jake could not even begin to understand. In the center was a ball of swirling light that hurt to look at directly. This was the exotic matter core that powered the entire ship. The ball of light was pulsing irregularly, changing colors from blue to red to something that was not quite a color at all. Energy was leaking out of it in streams and bolts that struck the walls and left glowing marks. "That does not look good," Admiral Hayes said. Dr. Clark checked her instruments. "The containment field is failing. All that exotic matter is going to explode outward in about 4 minutes. When it does, it will create a gravitational collapse that will crush the ship and everyone on it." Jake looked around the chamber. There were control panels everywhere, but they were all flashing error messages in alien languages. The ship's computer had stopped talking completely. The automatic systems that were supposed to fix problems like this had all shut down. "Can we shut it down?" Jake asked. "No," Dr. Clark said. "Too much energy is built up. If we try to shut it down now, it will explode immediately. The energy has to go somewhere." Jake studied the failing containment field and the streams of exotic matter leaking out of it. Then he looked at the ship's power distribution system. It was a maze of conduits and cables that carried energy to every part of the massive vessel. "What if we do not shut it down?" he said slowly. "What if we redirect the energy instead?" Dr. Clark looked where he was pointing. "You want to channel the exotic matter into the ship's power grid?" "Jake, that could overload every system on the ship." "The systems are already overloaded," Jake pointed out. "But if we can spread the energy out over the entire ship instead of letting it explode in one place, maybe the ship can handle it." Admiral Hayes was studying the power distribution panel. "It is worth a try. But how do we redirect exotic matter with tools that were not designed for it?" Jake smiled grimly and pulled a crowbar out of his toolkit. "The same way humans have always solved problems, we improvise." What followed was the strangest repair job in galactic history, while the most advanced beings in the universe stood helpless. In the main chamber, 3 humans began tearing apart alien technology with hammers, screwdrivers, and crowbars. They could not understand how the alien systems worked, so they treated them like human machines. When a conduit was blocked, they cleared it. When a connection was loose, they tightened it. When a component was sparking, they hit it with a wrench until it stopped. "This should not work," Dr. Clark muttered as she used electrical tape to connect alien power cables. "According to every law of physics I know, this should make things worse." "Good thing the exotic matter does not know about human physics," Jake replied, using a hammer to knock a bent power conduit back into shape. Admiral Hayes found the main power distribution control and stared at the alien interface. It was covered with symbols and lights that meant nothing to her. "Jake, I have no idea how to operate this thing." "Then do not operate it," Jake said. "Just open every channel you can find. Let the energy flow wherever it wants to go." Hayes began pressing buttons and turning dials randomly. In any sane universe, this would have caused a catastrophe. But the universe was already having a catastrophe. So, random button pressing actually helped. Slowly, the streams of exotic matter began to change direction. Instead of leaking randomly around the chamber, they started flowing into the power distribution system. The energy spread out through the ship's grid, powering systems that had been offline and charging, backup batteries that had been drained. The pulsing ball of light in the center of the chamber began to stabilize. Its color shifted from the dangerous red back to a steady blue. The containment field, relieved of some of the pressure, began to hold again. Dr. Clark watched her instruments in amazement. It is working. The exotic matter is dispersing through the ship's systems instead of building up for an explosion. Jake wiped sweat from his forehead and looked around the chamber. Smoke was still rising from several places where they had made repairs, and their improvised connections looked like they would fall apart if anyone sneezed too hard. But the ship was stable. "We should get back to the main chamber," he said. "The aliens are probably wondering what happened." When they returned to the main chamber, they found hundreds of aliens staring at them in absolute silence. The emergency. Lights had stopped flashing. The alarms had stopped wailing. The ship was no longer shaking. The ship's computer spoke for the first time in almost an hour. All systems stabilized. Exotic matter containment restored. Crisis resolved. The giant mantis creature was the first to speak. "How?" it asked in a voice barely above a whisper. Jake looked around the room at all the magnificent beings who had been so sure of their superiority just an hour before. "We fixed it the same way humans fix everything. We figured out what was broken, and then we found a way to make it work again." The crystal being's light was dim with confusion. "But your methods were so primitive. You used tools that were not designed for exotic matter manipulation. You made connections that should not work. You pressed controls without understanding." "What they did?" "Yes," Jake said simply. "Because when you do not understand something perfectly, you have to try things that might not work. When your perfect tools are not available, you use whatever tools you have. When your systems fail, you build new systems out of whatever pieces are left." The robot alien's red eyes blinked slowly. "This is how your species survived all those disasters you told us about?" "This is how we survive every disaster," Jake replied. "We do not wait for perfect solutions. We do not give up when our first plan fails. We keep trying new things until something works." The floating sun alien grew brighter, but this time it seemed like curiosity instead of anger. "And this is what you would bring to the Galactic Council?" Jake nodded. "When your perfect technology fails, when your natural abilities are not enough, when your advanced civilizations face something they have never seen before, you will need someone who knows how to fix things with whatever is available." The purple blob pulsed thoughtfully. "Someone who knows how to make fire from nothing but sticks. Someone who remembers that fire is still useful," Jake said, "even when you have the power to create stars." The chamber was quiet for a long moment. Then the ship's computer spoke again. "Motion to grant humanity full membership in the Galactic Council. Voting is now open." One by one, every alien species in the room voted yes. Not because humans were the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced, but because they were the ones who could fix things when everything went wrong. As Jake watched the vote tally appear on the main display, he smiled to himself. Humanity had just joined the galactic community, and they had done it in the most human way possible. They had solved an impossible problem with simple tools, stubborn determination, and the willingness to try things that should not work. The galaxy would never be the same. And for the first time in their history, when something went wrong, the advanced species of the universe would have someone to call who actually knew how to fix it.